Okay. What is everything that you can tell me about arthropods so far that we have discussed?
There's 30 compartments of arachnids.
Okay.
Three different. They got bodies. Some have two body segments.
Okay. Segmentation is one aspect that we talked about, which is rather unique in the animal kingdom for this time frame, because what had happened is as the evolutionary line had changed, okay, the most basic animals were ones that did not move at all. Okay, those would be examples of peripherans, which are known as sponges. Okay, and even though sponges aren't very, let's say, interesting to discuss, they certainly have their ecological function. And on the sea floor or ocean floor, whichever one you're talking about, even though they might not be that interesting, they're still very ecologically important. And that would be is when we think of sponges, okay, as far as not as an animal, what's the first thing that you think of when you hear sponge? Not plants. Yeah, something that you scrub with, because whether it's what you scrub with or this animal, they're very porous. Okay? So anything that has a pore in it, even like cement, that cement wall over there, if you run your hand over the surface of that, it is very porous. Okay? Well, for that's true, but I don't know what type of content that is. Cardboard, I suppose, of some sort. But with that, if it has lots of pores in it, again, it has holes. And what these sponges do is filter water. It cleans water for other animals that live around there. Then, as evolution had taken a leap forward, then you start talking about cnidarians, which is possibly, you could say, jellyfish, sea anemones. Some of them animals still don't move, but what had eventually started to happen is animals started to gain segments, okay? Not so much mollusks. Do you know what a mollusk is? Those are mammals.
It's a fish-looking thing. It's got a shell.
Clams are mollusks. That's a reptile. That's a vertebrate.
That's an amphibian.
Okay, that's also a vertebrate. We want invertebrates.
Oyster.
Okay, those are clams, though. We already said that. Okay, cuttlefish, squid, octopods, those are mollusks. Those still do not have segments to them. But what eventually had happened is these animals started to develop an exterior shell, and upon doing so, different compartments started to develop in the idea of segmentation. All right. And I believe this is where we left off with, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, what is everything you can tell me about a cephalothorax? We talked about that yesterday. What would a cephalothorax be?
Compound eyes.
No. No, not necessarily.
A bee.
That is an insect. We're not talking about insects. These are unique to arachnids. Okay? Cephalothorax means two body parts became segmented. Okay? And you could say it's about like its waistline is what would separate them. But cephalization means the opportunity for an animal to receive what we call ganglia. Okay? Ganglia is just a very archaic brain, if you want to call it that. Although there are certain animals that are highly intelligent that predates that of arthropods, and they are mollusks. So is there a certain mollusk that you can think of that is highly intelligent? No, those are mammals. What did you say? Someone said something over here. Okay, it came from that direction. I didn't know who it was. Yeah, octopods. Highly, highly intelligent. Okay? We usually don't picture intelligence with those types of animals before that of the arthropods. But cephalization just means the idea of getting sense organs for whether it's communication, okay, whether it is touch, taste, any one of those. So that would be an advantage to have those. And when we think of, as far as TVs are concerned, what's an antenna? What's its major function? To receive signals. So in this case, antenna then will detect certain chemicals called pheromones.
Isn't that kind of like echolocation?
Isn't that like what?
Echolocation?
No. So what might happen is, okay, trying to think of an example, like wasps would do this, probably bees as well. Okay? Well, not only that, but what can happen is you squash one of them, okay? They're going to have a lot of friends that come by because they will send a chemical distress signal in the form of a pheromone. And that pheromone then is a type of chemical signal that is then interpreted by, okay, other neighboring animals. So they pick up that signal, okay? So pheromones are actually very, very powerful chemical signals, or smelling signals. But we can't smell them because we don't have the hardware to do so. And the reason that we want to say hardware, okay, when you look at those, spiders from yesterday, or any type of animal that has venom, that is certainly going to be an advantage for that individual. But if it's such an advantage, why do we not have venom? Well, not only do we not need it, which could be what?
Hands? Fingernails?
That's probably the most powerful one right there, the brain. Okay? Some people have it, some people don't. Don't take that as a derogatory comment. Okay?
And if someone does.
Okay? So we don't have the hardware to not only produce venom, but also you have to have a way to deliver it. So what do spiders have to deliver that? What about scorpions then? The difference is, okay, spiders have two chelicerae or fangs. Scorpions don't have plural. It's singular. Where is their venom found? In their stinger and their tail. I believe it's called a telson, or a barb on their telson. But in a similar nature, what are skunks known for? For their spray. But they do not release that spray all the time. Why not?
They cannot always threaten. They can only produce so much of it.
Only want to do it when they're scared. That's probably the majority of it, but it's so taxing on their body to produce that. Same thing with venom. You have to have the ability to produce it, and you have to have the ability to deliver. We don't have either one. But the closest, I suppose you could say that would be is your canine teeth. But we don't have any need for venom, do we? No, of course not. That would be a totally null thought or voided thought, because, again, we don't need venom. Because we have our brains, okay?
Why do cats have whiskers? They can see in the night.
I suppose picks up wind, different types of turbulences of some sort. There's a reason that it's there, but to give that's they're detecting wind air currents. That same thing. So anything beyond that, I don't know. I'm not going to try to pick up an answer. Okay. For the most part, when it comes to eyes in arachnids, what is the sight like?
Many eyes. Very bored. Very bored. Very bored.
Okay, it's not very good. But can some spiders see well?
Yes.
Yes, because they're jumping spiders. It would be an advantage to see where it is you're going to jump and where it is that you're going to land. Now, when you look at that, the idea of, you might have thought, so what? That spider covered this distance, only 6 inches. Is that a pretty phenomenal feat for that animal? Yes, because you put it in that proportion, to be able to jump that far, that quickly, they said, is about like you jumping how far? A city block. Pretty phenomenal for a creature that size. Okay. So when you look at this, it says arthropods have an open circulatory system. If there's an open type, there might also be what? Closed type, and we'll talk more about that here in just a moment. When we talk about this, it says open spaces. Sinuses would be a good term for that. Do humans have sinuses? Yes, we do. Approximately, okay. Does anyone know where in your head? Probably superior or above the nose. But if that's what it is, what is it composed of? The human sinus. No, it doesn't depict these in the skull. I think that would be pretty tough to do. But a sinus is just an open area. Okay? So, you individuals, you're in the splash zone. Okay? So, who can, out of you four, since I'm standing on this side, who can we pick on? Anna. Okay? So, Anna goes on to say, gosh, I've got such a sinus headache. And some people do. So what does that mean? What does that mean in human terms if you have a sinus headache? I suppose you could say that your nose can be plugged, but these cavities behind your eyes, okay, those are just air-filled cavities. So the fluctuating air pressure, I think, would probably have an effect on that. That should, if atmospheric pressure maybe drops, it might cause the air pressure in there to push out in your sinuses. And that probably is quite painful. I'm fortunate enough, I don't get headaches very often, okay? That's not the case for maybe a lot of people in here. Is that possible? Yes. Okay. Sometimes you might get sinus headaches. Some people maybe even, I'm not saying complain about migraines, but say they get them, okay? And what the actual, I wouldn't say scientific name for a migraine, it might be tied into your sinuses. But for those individuals who have them, that is really, really unfortunate. But even when a headache does make its appearance, okay, how many of you are pill takers like Tylenol, ibuprofen? You have what you think is a small ailment, you take it, it goes away, right? Okay, but what may have, I'm not saying it's everybody, what may have happened is 2 ibuprofen was doing the trick. Does 2 ibuprofen work now? You don't have to answer that. Okay, that's your own personal choice to take that. So if the answer is no, what might have to happen? You need to up your dosage. What is your body doing when you're upping your dosage? Yeah, it's not that it's developing a resistance, it's developing a tolerance to it. Okay, so sometimes you might need to take more of that. Okay, so I'm not saying that's right or that's wrong. It's just unfortunate that people have headaches. Yes, yes. And if you don't get headaches, thank your lucky stars that you don't have that problem. But what we're talking about here is the idea of open areas, okay? Open spaces like sinuses. So just like a closed circulatory system, both of them, whether it's closed or open, there's a pumping heart. They both have blood vessels, just arteries carrying blood away from the heart, veins carrying blood back to the heart, and then what happens is this blood pools in an open area. Okay? So if it is just pooling in an open area, it has to get back into circulation. So the best way to look at that is in mollusks, like someone said oysters earlier. Who was that? Okay? So when you think of oysters, if you were to dissect a clam, would you ever have oysters again, do you think?
Probably no.
Okay? And I think that's probably pretty common. They might say no. There is a muscular structure called the foot. Okay? And for instance, what happens is as blood pools in that foot, it has open spaces in there, or blood sinuses. Well, how does that get back into circulation? Well, what happens is those animals will contract that muscle. That pushes that blood back into circulation. Just like, for instance, taking a tube of toothpaste, you squeeze it, it just pushes it right along. Okay? But should someone, for instance, if you take a tube of toothpaste, how many of you squeeze from the bottom? And when it's not squeezed from the bottom, how many does that bother? Like myself, because you're squeezing, all of a sudden you hear pop, because there's an air pocket in there, okay? So something very similar to this, it's not very efficient, but you have to take into account, okay, if we're talking about spiders, mollusks, any one of those are all invertebrates. What is their metabolism, fast or slow? We do not talk about fast metabolism until you get to the birds, and that's quite a way along the evolutionary line of vertebrates. Fish, cold-blooded, a lot of them. Amphibians, cold-blooded. Okay? Who's after amphibians, do you think?
Birds.
Nope, too far. Reptiles. Okay? Also, what we consider ectothermic. They're still cold-blooded. So then what we see happening then is as pressurization took place in that of fish, they do have a closed circulatory system. Their metabolism isn't quite as high, but it is a lot more efficient because rather than having blood pool in open spaces, does anyone know what links a really, really small artery to a really, really small vein? It starts with a C. You've heard of it before, but you just don't ever talk about it very often. It's one cell layer thick. No, it's not cytoplasm, it's not corn. Okay? So what is it that people choose to put on their head? A baseball what?
Cap.
Okay? So cap something.
Capsule.
Not capsule.
Capsid.
Capillaries. Okay? So capillaries are one cell layer thick. That is what links arteries to veins. And the reason that's important is because now you're talking about a pressurized system. So what that means is these types of animals, they're bleeding internally all the time because there's blood pooling in open areas. What happens if we as humans are bleeding internally?
We die.
That's certainly possible. Okay? So again, you have to take into account open sinuses. It's not pressurized. That is the biggest difference between open and closed. Pressurization and open spaces or sinuses versus capillaries.
What animals have that? Where they bleed internally?
What we're talking about right now.
Clams.
Clams, spiders, scorpions. They still can bleed to death, but you might just say, I thought we just said they're bleeding internally. Well, they are. On the inside, you can still, maybe unfortunately, if a tarantula, the biggest of all the spider families, if that falls from a great height and its abdomen can split open, it can still bleed to death. Okay? And even though the pressure isn't very high, the blood will still find its way out. For us as humans, you break that blood vessel. What is worse, an artery or a vein to cut? Why are arteries much worse? Say that again. They can be. Where's the pressure higher, an artery or a vein? It's much higher in an artery. So what happens is every time your heart contracts, it's going to push any blood out of that hole. With a vein, it might just seep out of there. You got a better chance of sealing that plug on a vein than what you do on artery. Okay, so one of the things that I thought I had a few of these.
Are you going to pull that out?
Okay, I am. Okay. What does it say? Starts with an L. Lubers. Does anyone know what a luber is? It's got a common name like what? Grasshoppers. Grasshoppers are lubers. Okay? So I've only got 5 of these left. Sorry?
What do you got soaking in there? What's the liquid? Yeah.
It's a type of aldehyde compound like formaldehyde. I mean, it's not that it waif it towards you. I thought you were curious, though. Is anyone curious?
Can I try some?
What do you think? What do you think?
Maybe not.
Okay. So we've got a few of these here. All right. So I don't know. Some people think this is disgusting. But what's your perception?
Sit down, Chris. Come here.
Yes? Are we going to? Oh, okay. Sorry. I dropped it. Okay.
Drop it on the table.
All right. So, sorry, I didn't mean to skip you 3. You're good? You're good? Okay. Oh, I don't know. There's 2 more in there. All right. So, what can you interpret? What would the segmentation be different in? We haven't talked about insects yet. What might the difference be between insects and arachnids? They've got 1 more segment. Okay? Insects have 3 segments. Arachnids only have 2 or even 1. Okay? So I don't know when we might do this. Well, we're going to do this, but I don't know when. Probably sometime next week. Okay? So with that, we will continue with spiders here, and then tomorrow we'll start talking about what molting means and what a mandible is and what chelicerae are. And you're seeing that with spiders. That's how they inject venom. Okay, so we'll catch up to you next time.